Thank you, honorable members. Please be seated. The honorable member, the, honor, the honorable member, Mr. Jermaine Figuera. The honorable member, Mr. Figuera, because I'm not going to come back to him unless Mr. Ramjatan wants to go in his place, and then when he comes in, he gets to speak. Honorable member, Mr. Ramjatan.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I want to indicate that it would seem that once again, members in the government benches, honorable members they are, seem to have gotten the core and crux of this motion misplaced. When deaths occur at a prison as a result of whatever the conflagration or whatever the causes, it is incumbent on any administration to do an inquiry that is separate and apart from that which will come from the prison authority. And the crux of this motion, it is entitled and headed up, I think, appointment of a commission of inquiry to investigate the unrest at Lusignan prison. So it is not as if the word commission of inquiry is not there. The title of the motion is appointment of a commission of inquiry to investigate the unrest at Lusignan. Say that that is not what is being pointed to. Because even in the whereas clauses, it is indicative that we are mentioning, and my learned sister, Gita, honorable member, is indicating that in accordance with the Commission of Inquiry Act 1903, a commission should be called. So, this disingenuous method of wanting to scamper away from that which is always good governance. That is, to ensure that you have an independent inquiry outside of the institution where it occurred. And this has happened on almost all the occasions where deaths have occurred. And it is not as if deaths only occurred whilst I was public security minister. It was unfortunate that 17 persons died. But a commission of inquiry was called for. Again, when there was another major fire, commission of inquiry was called for. I remember the holding center just before the PPP got into office. There was 4 prisoners escaping. An inquiry outside by Mr. Dale Erskine and I think a senior superintendent of police. They did an inquiry separate and apart from that which was done. And that is what we need as a human rights issue for those who have died, and also consequent upon knowing what are the causes, so that we can all then ensure that the remedies are in place, if that is possible. If it is a requirement of resources, we are then going to go on to it. If it is a requirement for change of staff, or some people who are just derelict in their duties, we certainly can knock them out. And that is what an inquiry, whether it is a board of inquiry at the ministerial level or a commission of inquiry, and this one is pointing to a commission of inquiry, this motion. Why all of that, Honorable Member Mr. Joe? There was no need for that. And we must also, whenever we are dealing with motions, not necessarily look exclusively at the the resolve clauses. We must look also at the whereas clauses, which is giving the sequence as to what we are getting to get full disclosure. How are you going to get full disclosure? And if the whereas clauses is tending towards a commission of inquiry and is pointing you there, Mr. Speaker, we will be doing the citizens of Guyana a dishonor when we do not get what is called this independent inquiry. The international human rights bodies can very well also come down upon us. And I really thought that it was going to be what is called a soft motion that will be supported. I don't know ultimately what will happen here, but I am urging that we do not go the way that I see indications from the speech as given by Mr. Joe, Honorable Member. Look, I realize that reports sometimes from these independent inquirers might not find the administration liking them. They might very well dislike them. But wherever you have a democratic society, wherever you have good governance, it is important that they look for those things. In the executive summary of the very last one that was held, report of the Board of Inquiry to probe into the escape of 4 prisoners at the Lusignan prison on April 20th, 2020. The 2 persons, Mr. Dale Erskine, a former Director of Prisons, and Mr. Marlon Chapman, very senior Superintendent of Police, I think Assistant Commissioner he was, they did this inquiry. And in it, getting all the facts together as to what caused the rampage, what caused the scenario of them rushing to the door, as I understand, the prisoners rushing to the door, all were particularly and meticulously discerned from various witnesses that were called. And that is what we need in this place. Get down to the actual facts. Then they also went on to deal with what the inquiry recommended. We will give what is called justice to both the prison officers that were there and the prisoners who were there when we do inquiries of this sort. And it is important that we do not, by virtue of the fact that so many gunshots were fired and all of that, we do not know the reasons why. Because the police and the joint services probably had very good reasons to do what they did. But if it is kept away from us, if the transparencies are not there, we will not know the sequence of events that led to the death of Herbert and the other person. and the shooting of about 15, 16 other people. Some of whom I understand were there for small amounts of marijuana, by the way. Yes, because I understand from the report that there were some other people who were shot from the newspapers. They were there serving sentences. And so it is important, Mr. Speaker, that we don't make a mockery of these issues. We must ensure, and that is why we have a Commission of Inquiry Act. That is why also ministers have powers to constitute boards of inquiry. And so, not because ministerially you're going to deal with it as to what the recommendations are from previous fires or the deaths and so on, the Patterson report and so on. Whenever you have a new incident, there must be an inquiry. That is my point here. I want also to indicate that we must not do as Joe did, giving the impression that the prison system, which we have always indicated, lack the resources to expand the infrastructural works. Suffered that category of de minimis kind of resources long before the coalition took its government. Long before. Our prison system at Camp Street was about 100 and more years old. There were wooden prisons and so on. And so just to jump to the Ramjatan cause it, I mean, I have a skin of a rhino, as a Russian said, when it comes to these political attacks, as if Ramjatan caused the fire. But that's not the point. The point is that we have, as a parliament here, to address the issues as to ensuring that resources go that way so that we can have the prison authorities working in better conditions. They work in extremely bad conditions. We also have to have more resources going in that way so that the prisoners can have a better condition of life. And they can reach the standards that the convention in relation to incarceration and the convention, that we do that. But when you do it, the impression is given now that you didn't do it in accordance with procurement rules. I remember after the first fire and you started dealing with the issue of the Mazaruni expansion program, you had 6 or 7 people who bid. As a matter of fact, when the winner, Nabi and Sons, was announced by the procurement board or whoever it was, they quarreled. A certain businessman quarreled. And I said, please go to the Public Procurement Commission. That is where we got to address these issues. And the matter went to the Public Procurement Commission. And the commission ruled and dismissed after several days of taking witnesses and all of that. In similar circumstances too, it must be understood that procurement rules, were abided by when we indicated that we want steel cells after getting a whole load of criticisms. Steel Cell is one company that makes them. And then you had to go through the procurement processes to ensure that NPTAB agreed with that, and NPTAB passed that. And you know, this slighting and smiting of these processes shouldn't be done here to the extent whereby a lot of false news being given around these issues. We are not going to move forward, and we're not going to make the prisoners' life better, nor the prison officers' lives better. And so it is important that we, together, united in action, I believe, necessary to get to the facts of matters, and then we know how much more money we can spend in relation to what is happening at the holding bay here. Because of the fire, you had to do the Lusitnan thing. And I did not find that a bad idea that the PPP government had started certain things at the Lusignan prison site, the Holding Bay area. They had put up that. That is quite true. But what you needed was far more concrete and steel rather than wood and ground as at Lusignan. And that is what we did. So when it comes to all these problems, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge that, oh yes, we can heckle and talk, but when you're going to go on the record as this being your speech, please do not allow these falsehoods. It does not go down well, and neither will we in a way unite under the action that are necessary to move the process forward. I am urging that this be understood in relation to this motion. And that all this cheap talk, that, oh, it ain't got in the resolve clause, it ain't got that which is a commission of inquiry. What do you think we're asking for? What else could be asked for where in the whereas clause you're talking about the commission of inquiry and the commission of inquiry act? So let us place some significance and importance to these words and ensure that that which is being asked for here, so that we can have full disclosure. Full disclosure means a commission of inquiry. But if they want to, read outside of that, well, they can so do. But that is obviously what this motion is all about, Mr. Speaker. And for every death in Guyana, we must have an independent inquiry. It is important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member Dr. Frank Anthony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honourable colleagues, I rise this afternoon to join the discussions on this motion on the riot at the Lusignan prison, which was on the 19th of September 2020. And I would also like to join with the other colleagues in expressing our condolences to the families of Winston Hubbard and Earl Graham, who lost their lives during the riot. I also want to commend the officers of the Guyana Prison Services for their professionalism, and I do hope that the service, the Guyana Prison Service, would have provided professional counseling for those who were involved in this traumatic event. Mr. Speaker, as was said by the mover of the motion, myself and Minister Ben visited the prison on the 19th of September. And the reason why I accompanied Minister Ben was that early in the morning of the 19th, the prisoners did not take their breakfast when it was given to them. And there was a demand that they wanted to see the minister. And he asked me to accompany him because we knew that there were a few cases of COVID-19 that was in the prison. And Minister Ben was very worried because of the overcrowding situation at the prison, that it can lead to a lot of people getting infected. So we went there around maybe about 12, sometime between 12 and 1 o'clock. And when we entered the prison, when we came through the doors of the compound, there was a loud cheering of all the prisoners who were in the different holding bays because they saw Minister Ben and that he was going to address some of the issues that they were feeling or they wanted to ventilate. And so each of the holding bay, they identified a couple of representatives to talk about what were the issues that were affecting them. So holding day 1, holding day 2, holding day 3, and holding day 4. So we started from one end and we spoke with the representatives. I think there were about 4 or 5 of them. And the others were around them listening to what was being asked. And they would tell them what they wanted to be asked, and we continue by responding to some of the queries. So we were able to do 1 and 2. And as we were going, I thought that the main question would have been questions relating to health and COVID. But actually, that was not what they were interested in. What they were interested in and what they told us was that because of COVID, since March or April or sometime that the court system had stopped to function. And therefore, many of them who were in there for remand and they wanted to get their trials and so forth were not able to get their trials. And they have been there for this period of time without any trial. So their main focus was always about trying to see how you can restart the court system so that they can get a hearing. And almost all the complaints, were around that. Of course, we knew that there were a few cases of COVID, and we wanted to take measures to make sure that those persons were identified and isolated so that they wouldn't spread it among the other prisoners. And unfortunately, after we engaged the guys in holding day 2, some of the others, perhaps, I don't know what, overcame them. And they started throwing some rocks at us. I think they broke the floor, and they start pelting the rocks. And then we took shelter under, I think there was a tent in the yard, and then subsequently we left. And that was the kind of behavior. But we went there with all good intentions of helping to resolve and solve whatever problems had existed. And that's why we visited the prison. At least that's why I was there. I heard from the mover of the motion that perhaps, and she phrased it in such a way that maybe our visit was politically ill-advised. And maybe that had directly, it was directly that this was the possible cause for the chaos that ensued and the subsequent loss of life. Those were her words. We didn't go there for anybody to lose their life. We went there to protect people. We went there to offer support. We went there to be able to prevent transmission of COVID in Lusican prison. That's why we went there. And without going through what might be factual, we arrived at this type of argument, which is totally unfair. So perhaps if we want to lower the temperature, we have to start thinking about what we are saying to each other. And if we are more careful with our words, we can prevent some of these very things that we all argue about and talk about. We can prevent these things from happening. With the COVID situation in the prison, after the riots and all of that, we ended up, by the end of September, having close to 200 and something cases of COVID in that prison. And to isolate those persons who became infected, we had to move them out of Lusican. We subsequently took them to Madarini. We had to set up a different arrangement there so that we can isolate them. And after spending about 10 days there, and they were all asymptomatic and so forth, we then brought them back into the prison situation. And so we took some measures to prevent further spread of the disease in the prison. And in addition to all of that, at Lusican, with the help of one of the UN agencies, we were able then to set up some special isolation centers within the compound of Lusignan. So whenever anybody is tested positive, the prison authorities and the doctors who are working there would be able now to isolate them. And with COVID, because of overcrowding, there's always going to be a challenge that we'll face in these types of institutions where you can have rapid spread. And we have seen that. We have been able to contain the disease at Lusignan. We have now, I think, about 16 cases who have been isolated. But we've seen now, as I speak today, we have about 33 cases at Tineri. And already we have taken measures in place to be able to isolate all those persons and have them separate from the general population. We also saw, as of today, we have 4 prison officers in New Amsterdam who have tested positive. And 1 prisoner at New Amsterdam have tested positive, and we have isolated him. So we are there to offer service. And in fact, during September last year, we have added more nurses and doctors to the prison service so that they can help in terms of protecting people's lives by offering this type of service. They have put special measures in place when you have an intake of a new prisoner, things that they'll have to go through, screened and so forth, before they enter into the general population. And anybody visiting would have to now go through some special procedures. So I was there because my colleague needed some additional advice, and so we went. And we thought that by doing so, that we were being very proactive in terms of helping those persons who are at Lusignan. Mr. Speaker, you know, I heard some of the arguments that were being made, and I must say that with some of them, let's take, for example, the actual motion. Apart from what is in the title, calling for the Commission of Inquiry, we also have at whereas clause number 3, it pointed out that, you know, you had 2 deaths on the 19th of September. And then when we come to whereas clauses number 5, it then somehow miraculously moved from being 2 deaths to the deaths of several prisoners. And my understanding of several prisoners would mean that it's more than 2. Right? So here we got just within one, from whereas clause 3 to whereas clause 5, we move from 2 to now several. And then when we come to whereas clauses 6, it then gone to 3 persons died. So within the same document, we have these types of inconsistency. Now, there's no confusion in the sense of how many persons died. We knew that there were 2 persons that died. And the honorable member who moved the motion clearly stated that when she started her presentation this afternoon by stating that. But somehow, when you read the motion, it tends to try to amplify the actual situation that was there. And it moved from 2 to several, then to 3. Something must be wrong with that. Got to be wrong with that. Something got to be wrong with that. And therefore, that is something that, again, we got to be careful about. Mr. Speaker, it stated that at whereas clause 4, that there was a lack of information. From the time the incident occurred at Lusignan, every single newspaper in this country was reporting what was going on there. So you had Stabroek News, who spoke about what was going on there. Kaichor News, the Chronicle, Guyana Times, all of these outlets were reporting on what took place at Lusignan. And then you have all the online sites, the Marara Waves, Newsroom, and all these other sites that were reporting on what took place at Lusignan. And it didn't end there. If you go back and you look at the newspaper, over the week or so, they continue with a number of follow-up stories, how many people were injured. I heard when Mr. Ramjatan made his presentation, he said 16 persons were injured. There were 7, the honorable member. There were 7 persons who were injured. That was widely reported in all of the newspapers. All of them. So, again, we got to be careful with what we are saying and how we amplify these things, because it can be misleading to the public. And so, Mr. Speaker, we can easily garner the information that the member is asking for. And if you just go back to the newspaper, you will see all of this in there. Every single thing is in there. So this whereas clause that is saying that because of a lack of information surrounding the following matters, it is a matter of public concern. All of the information is available. What else is there to disclose? What else? I don't know. But here it is that we are coming and we are asking for some special inquiry into what happened on the 19th of September. Mr. Speaker, it's interesting because apart from the incidents that the honorable member, Mr. Ramjatan, spoke about, and some other, I think, Minister Joe Hamilton spoke about, where we talk about what happened at the fire in 2016. If we look at that period from 2015 to 2020, the amount of incidents that you had with prisons in Guyana, it is quite revealing. And I just want to highlight a few of those. So, the 3rd of March 2016, Camp Street Prison was set on fire. 17 persons lost their life. And then you have in 2017, on the 10th of July, you had another massive fire at Camp Street. On the 15th of October 2018, you had a breakout at Lusignan Prison. 3 persons escaped, there was a fire, and then there was a subsequent riot at Lusignan where 6 persons were shot at and were injured. On the 6th of November 2018, there was another breakout at the security block of the Timeri prison, where 1 inmate was stabbed 8 times and a prison officer was stabbed in his arm. In July 2019, another fire in the Holding Bay at Lusignan. On the 25th of May 2020, you had another breakout in the dining hall at the Timeri prison. And then, Mr. Speaker, on the 12th of July 2020, another riot in the Holding Bay at Lusignan where 15 persons were injured. 15 persons. And, Mr. Speaker, with all of these incidents, I'm wondering, how many commissions of inquiry did we have? We had 1. Right? We had 1. And I have the report here. This is the report of that commission of inquiry. And when you look at the recommendations, lots of recommendations that were made. Administrative types of recommendation, It has about welfare, infrastructure, the judiciary and the magistracy, and the legal things that you want to do, Standing Law Revision Commission, the Guyana Bar, Parole Board, Rehabilitation Program, Vulnerable Population, Juveniles, Indigenous, and then Medical. And how many of these recommendations have we actually implemented? Not all. Not all. Not all. And so we did the Commission of Inquiry, but we have not put what they have recommended in place. Mr. Speaker, we have to work to improve the conditions in the prison. There's no doubt about that. We have to work to reduce the overcrowding that we are having there. We have to put better conditions in there. And we all know the tragic circumstances that led to some of those things. And Mr. Speaker, I've had some acquaintance with the prison system for a while because I actually served on the Georgetown Prison Visiting Committee in the early 90s and became its chairman at one point and served there for a number of years. So I know exactly some of the conditions that were in there. And then I also served when I was the chairman of the Georgetown Prison Visiting Committee. I also served on the parole board. So I have a fair idea, and I had the opportunity then to visit almost every single prison in this country and interview prisoners and talk to them and get an insight into some of the complaints. But the recent kind of thing that we have seen here have shown that we need to definitely do something about the improvement of the conditions in the prison. And you know, Mr. Speaker, the complaints that we got on the 19th of September did not, we just didn't listen to them and did nothing about them. We were able to discuss many of those things that arise from the complaints that were made. This was discussed with the Attorney General, and I must say that out of those discussions, we were able to come up with some very creative solutions on how to have virtual courts. And by late last year, the Attorney General had about 20 such courts operating at the various prison sites. And we are going to put another 12 more in operation, bringing the total to about 32 virtual courts that would be in operation. The government has expended close to $500,000 US in getting these types of equipment and the spaces and so forth to be able to hold virtual courts. So, Mr. Speaker, we have been working. We have been trying to improve the conditions. We have been trying to address the concerns that was raised with us, and hopefully some of these things that we have done would help to alleviate some of the situations that we met when we came into office. So, Mr. Speaker, I think from what was presented here, I don't think that right now there's a need for a commission of inquiry. What we need to do is to continue doing the reforms that we have, continue putting and improving the place, implement some of these recommendations that were not implemented since the first commission of inquiry. We need to continue doing that, and we need all sides for us to put our heads together to make sure that we improve the conditions of the prisoners in our prison system. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister of Health. The Honorable Member, Mr. Jermaine Figueroa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think I must apologize for being late. And I think I know I should offer the House a reason why. And the reason why me and my colleagues are late is because we were attending to the parents of the Henry boys. The parents who traveled not once, not twice, but 3 times to this National Assembly in an effort to support the motion that was tabled.
Honorable member, could you stay to the motion before us? Because I would have to respond to you with respect to your side knowing the position of the speaker with respect to that motion. Please continue with the motion. Thanks for your apology with respect to not being on time.
I didn't offer an apology, Honorable Speaker.
Okay.
I'm saying, and I believe you will agree with me, that that motion is important to this nation,
Honorable member, can you stick to the current motion?
and it must be
I
heard.
accept the reason you gave for not being here when your name was called.
I didn't even you didn't even allow me to state my reason, but you are in charge.
You said, sir, that you are here tending to the Henry family who was here, and you went on to say they were here 3 times.
Well, what I did
So
want
I
to say
understand.
is that
I understand.
because you didn't allow the motion.
Honorable member, can you now proceed to speak to the Lusican motion?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to lend support along with my colleagues in support of this motion. But before I delve directly into my presentation, I believe, Mr. Speaker, it would be befitting of me to respond to some utterances made by the Honorable Minister Hamilton, who of late is known to be making wild and reckless statements that he cannot substantiate. And he said, Mr. Speaker, that this motion does not make representation for a commission of inquiry. I will further down in my presentation, Mr. Speaker, bring this reality to the honorable member so that he could understand what this motion really was seeking. I must commend the Honorable Frank Anthony, who in his presentation genuinely sounded as if, a lot of efforts are being put to bring the prison system to a better position. And I think it's indeed commendable. However, I must disagree with the honorable member in him saying that there should be no need for a commission of inquiry. Mr. Speaker, this motion is of utmost importance for our nation state. Mr. Speaker, I must reiterate a point that the Honorable Hamilton made, where he said that the coalition members, Mr. Speaker, use people for political points and to get political gains. I resent that position, Mr. Speaker, because we on this side, Mr. Speaker, value every Guyanese. And we, in us valuing every Guyanese, Mr. Speaker, we make valiant efforts to represent their interests. And if you indeed value people, and it's not about making political points, then how can you say you value them, but in the same breath you fire in thousands of Guyanese. You are discriminating against the distribution of COVID grants, Mr. Speaker. How can you say you value people and the methods to protect the citizens from COVID is not a true reflection of your efforts? So we question if indeed your utterances in valuing people are indeed genuine. Mr. Speaker, this motion is in search of truth. Truth that led to the unrest, the injuries, and untimely death of 2 prisoners. Mr. Speaker, if we all are able to honestly look through the human lens, recognizing that all life is precious, and we must uphold the dignity of all Guyanese, whether or not they have committed an offense, we may not have been debating this motion here today. Mr. Speaker, in 2016, the PPP called for the Minister of Public Security to be sacked over horror in the prisons. Stabrook News, March 8, 2016. And the then General Secretary said, and I quote, "We did not leave a perfect system in place, but the government must take the blame," end of quote. And at that time, Mr. Speaker, the PPP was an observer. Now you are the government. Now you are in the seat to make the system perfect, or at least closer to being perfect. Mr. Speaker, the question is, who is to be blamed now, and who is to be fired for the horror of the Lusignan prison? Mr. Speaker, does the PPP still hold the view that the Minister of Home Affairs and his government must take the blame and that he should be sacked? Mr. Speaker, if we could allow ourselves to see all prisoners first as human beings, irrespective of their offense. After all, aren't they already incarcerated, paying for the crimes they have committed? If we do sum up the courage, Mr. Speaker, to take that look, then and only then, we can appreciate that the circumstances surrounding the Lusignan prison demands justice through an independent investigation. Mr. Speaker, on the 3rd of March 2020, the PPP in a press release called for a commission of inquiry into the occurrences at the prisons, and the gentleman of a president at the time saw the wisdom in that call, and the country got a COI into the incident, Mr. Speaker. However, today, those recommendations from the COI have just been gathering further dust because of the nature of its content. The Honorable Minister said, why you didn't implement these COI recommendations? And the reason being is because we had elections on March 2nd. This COI was called for on the 3rd of March. So how could it have been possible for these recommendations to be implemented? Mr. Speaker, these recommendations include the release, issues such as early release of least at-risk prisoners, harmonizing sentencing guidelines, and a 21st century parole board. We on this side know those issues are taboo to the PPP because they demonize the early release of youthful prisoners by President Granger, which oftentimes included women. Mr. Speaker, the COI recommendations is something that this administration must and should consider for the occurrences at the Lusignan prison. Mr. Speaker, this nation is still in the dark with what kind of inmates the PPP released in 2020. And we ask that the minister in question provide this House with the details of those inmates who were given early release. Is this, Mr. Speaker, the democracy and the transparency that the Ministry of Governance represent? Mr. Speaker, justice demands that we unearth the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. The silent voices of those prisoners whose lives were snuffed seamlessly without just cause are calling for justice from the grave. Mr. Speaker, this motion is a call for transparency, for accountability and justice. I believe it is fair to ask questions such as, what were the reason or reasons for this unrest that led to the injuries of countless prisoners and the death of 2 inmates? The alleged cover-up of their murders by actions of some officials must be addressed. Were the actions of those officers in question the best way to handle the unrest? Were the prisoners voicing their concerns about the prison conditions that were jeopardizing their very basic human right, the right to life? Were there evidence of COVID-19 at the prison? These are reasonable questions that require honest answers. Mr. Speaker, the details of the events on the 19th of September 2020 at the Louisiana prison are at best sketchy. Were the prisoners injured and killed to allow the ministers who were visiting to evade them? Or were they really injured and killed attacking prison security? Mr. Speaker, a properly conducted COI may be able to give answers because the media did report that ministers had to be shielded to escape the disgruntled inmates who wanted to be treated as humans in an infested COVID-19 prison. Mr. Speaker, could the Honorable Minister Ben inform this House if this was the case indeed, and were you afraid of contracting COVID-19 because subsequent testing proved a large number of inmates were indeed COVID-19 positive? Mr. Speaker, this country should not be mistaken. Your government and the extension of its ministers cared nothing about those prisoners' health and the prison overcrowding. It was just a window dressing opportunity that turned sour. Mr. Speaker, your government presently allows speedboats, hire cars, and minibuses to carry passengers which are seated just like prisoners in a cell, inches apart, even as COVID deaths increase and infections increase daily. This is a fact, and it is pathetic, Mr. Speaker, but the PPP cares less. The Vice President called it soft enforcement of COVID rules. What a joke. That involves human lives. No amount of political talk will hide this fact. Thus, one can easily conclude that it is the access to international COVID-related funding that is driving the PPP's COVID policy, as this is a common view of the man in the streets. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Health say differently? Can the Minister tell this House what is the COVID task force policy on vending in the various markets in Guyana? Mr. Speaker, it is no secret about the inhumane condition of our correctional facilities. But the question is, what can we do? What can be done to make the environment in which the inmates inhabit cleaner, more healthy, and safe? Infections are spreading rapidly amidst the chronic overcrowding and unhygienic conditions, coupled with a lack of proper access to health care, places inmates' lives at greater risk. This situation has the potential to be dire and adds more strain on the health sector. Mr. Speaker, in this deadly COVID-19 environment, Guyana, fortunately or unfortunately, has 3 ministers of health in the ministry, and collectively they have failed with distinction. COVID deaths, infection rates, and policy and COVID prevention tells a story from August 2nd, 2020 to present. The ministry could not even advise cabinet colleagues on how to protect themselves from COVID, much less the population. Mr. Speaker, the prison population is not in itself a demilitarized zone confined to its own existence. It is part of the society. One such prison, Mr. Speaker, is in the heart of the city. Therefore, we must look at the genesis of this unrest that led to those most unfortunate situations. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note the United Nations spokesperson for Human Rights Office, Mr. Rupert Colville, expressed concern that in the Americas, infections are spreading rapidly amidst chronic overcrowding and unhygienic conditions, coupled with a lack of proper access to health care. Mr. Covelli cited a violent prison revolt in Venezuela that reportedly resulted in 47 inmates losing their lives, and a prison riot on the 27th of April in Peru that left 9 inmates dead, calling on governments to strengthen measures to prevent violence in detention facilities and avoid excessive violence by authorities in suppressing riots and regaining control. Mr. Speaker, with your government in office, Guyana is being robbed of a real opportunity at prison reform. Restructuring Guyana's prison system cannot.
Honorable Member, did I hear you say, Mr. Speaker, with your government? This is the second time. We have the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, 3 arms of the state. So I allow the first one to pass. So, could you rephrase that?
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much.
I'm so guided.
That,
Mr. Speaker, with the government in office, Guyana is being robbed of the real opportunity at prison reform. Restructuring Guyana's prison system cannot be about sending selective officers on leave or the erection of new buildings, but by undertaking an holistic approach to make good what was deemed crooked, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it would be instructive if the Minister of Home Affairs or any of his friends on the other side informed this House what rehabilitative program for prisoners is presently ongoing, at which prisons, and by what means for the last 3 months. Mr. Speaker, the challenges in the system over the past 5 years were met with sarcasm, mockery, and cynicism from the PPP. Mr. Speaker, today, as we debate this motion, inmates continue to be at risk of contracting the COVID-19 virus in an overcrowded, unsavory, unhygienic environment. The continuing attempts to escape prison, and many are found with drugs, banned items, and other forms of contraband that make its way into the prison by very creative prisoners and undoubtedly some unscrupulous prison officers involved in the alleged lucrative criminal endeavor. The continued discovery of contraband, knives, cutlasses, cell phones, drugs, alcoholic beverages, Mr. Speaker, is such a mind-boggling reality. And it begs the question, Mr. Speaker, how is it that men who are incarcerated are being allowed to have these dangerous weapons? How is it that prisoners in prison are given cell phones, are given alcoholic beverages, Hennessy, syrup, Kazakh? How is that possible? The system, Mr. Speaker, is one that needs a commission of inquiry so that those findings, Mr. Speaker, can arrest the situation that pertains. We need our prisons to be safe. Mr. Speaker, one will agree that these tendencies are not new, but today they are implicitly embraced by prisoners and security. And the government, Mr. Speaker, is solely responsible. Mr. Speaker, these stated facts make prison and prison reform a must. How successful will attempts at such reform be, however, in a narco state where the first-time offenders and hardened convicts fight for survival in the same cell? What is more frightening, Mr. Speaker? What is more frightening, Mr. Speaker, is that hardened convicts appear to have a better chance at being released early based on the PPP's posture. Mr. Speaker, why the country has not seen a list of the inmates that were released in 2020? We need to know what crimes these inmates would have committed, how long they would have served their time in prison, Mr. Speaker. The nation needs to know, because these prisoners are now back into the society, and I was told that some of the prisoners were drug traffickers, were charged for bestiality. These are the people the PPP would have released into our societies, and yet still, Mr. Speaker, we are blind, we are unaware of who these individuals are, and if they would have satisfied the time that they were in prison, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the pivot of this motion is in the whereas clause 2, where it implies that the onus is on the President to ensure justice by ensuring an independent commission is set up to thoroughly investigate the circumstances surrounding the deaths, Mr. Speaker, and the unrest of what took place at the Lusignan prison, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the time has come for us to definitely have a holistic approach with prison reform. We need, Mr. Speaker, to look at the package prison officers are in receipt of, so that we can encourage them with their packages not to be involved in criminality. Mr. Speaker, we have presented a motion, we have presented the arguments, and we believe, Mr. Speaker, that justice requires that the government listen to our motion, listen to our rational reasoning, and accept this motion, and ensure that justice is served for those inmates that were not only injured, but those inmates who died. And I trust that the desire of us on this side to have a commission of inquiry be taken with serious consideration. That is the only way we will know what really as a result of what transpired. And as a result of a COI, Mr. Speaker, it can add to the previous COI, which informs all of us collectively of the best ways we can reform our prison system. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Mr. Figuera, I now call on the Honorable Member and Minister of Home Affairs, Brinley Horatio Benn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first off, I'd like to repeat some of the things I said when we had this unfortunate event at the Lusignan prison in September, where I made extensive remarks on the incident, where said, I said that we deplored the incident, we deplored and were very sad at the loss of life, that we extended condolences to the families of those killed, who died, and to those who injured, and to those who were injured, and we committed to continuing our work to make sure that we improve the conditions at the Lusignan prison and the entire prison system itself. I would repeat that our first discussion in relation to prisons happened at both the first and second cabinet meetings of the government, where I pointed out the dire conditions at Lusignan prison, in the first instance related to the severe overcrowding and the degrading and inhumane conditions which existed there. That is what we inherited. And that is what the first thing which I pointed out to the government, which had to be done in the security sector, was the issue of the conditions at the Lusignan prison and the miserable conditions that the prisoners were in. In fact, I pointed out that the prisoners were living in worse conditions than the pigs and chickens that were out there. And I made extensive remarks on this problem when I became minister, and I made a number of visits there. The second visit being the unfortunate occurrence when I asked Minister Frank, honorable member, who so eloquently expressed and identified the occurrence there on the day that we visited, when these bad things happened unexpectedly, regrettably. Mr. Speaker, we did not create the conditions of the Lusignan prison. We came and we met them there, and we attempted to immediately respond to the problem. I said to the prison directorate immediately that we had to spread out the men, because they were lying next to each other on the ground, on mattresses, with others and hammocks over them, over 600 men, and there was no space, and I was worried about the fact that we had COVID, and that certainly that we would be impacted by it in the prison. We did not create the conditions in the prison. The conditions which created the situation which unfolded in September, which led to the deaths of those persons, started, in my view, with the fire and the unfortunate deaths of 17 persons in the Georgetown prison. That's where it started. It started there, but it was compounded by the fact that they put these men from the Georgetown prison, added them to those at Lusignan, mixed them all together, and had them on the sheds, basically open to the weather, near a swamp. And let me thank Frank again for giving me 600 or more treated mosquito nets to take up there the other day. But here again we have honorable members standing up in this house, accusing us of all kinds of depredations. I heard the Honorable Maipal He said while Frank was on his feet that you and Robeson go there and kill the man. That is the kind of thing we are being faced with in this honorable house. That is what he said. But we have to face this every day. We're not going to take it personal. We're going to continue our work to improve the conditions of the prisoners, of the welfare of the staff, and improve the general conditions of our people all over Guyana, in spite of what they say, in spite of what you say on that side of the house, in spite of the blatant lies and mischief maliciously
Honorable
which you promote.
Minister, a couple of words, you on that side and lies.
The honorable members
Could
on
you
the
withdraw
other
them?
side, the very honorable members on the other side, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker.
And the lies.
Mr. The untruth, sir. The malicious untruth. Mr. Speaker, I emphasize, I repeat, that the loss of the lives of Earl Graham and Winston Forbort is extremely regrettable. We apologize for it somehow because we were also in charge as minister. We did not go out and seek to have anything of this kind happen. We didn't want it to happen, and we would never have wanted it to happen. And I would say, according to what the honorable member Figueroa said just now, we were not in the prison while the riot unfolded and the unfortunate events occurred. We had departed, but we were aware and we were told that they had broken out of the fence in Holland Bay 3 and 4 and were storming the front gate and attacking the officers. And we were aware when we departed that over the wall of the prison, these concrete blocks, which had to be prepared in Holland Bay 3 and 4, had to be previously prepared, were coming right over the wall, and for safety, we were told to leave. So, the honorable member, Comrade Ramjitan, and the other members too, honorable as they are, spoke to the issue of the conditions of the prison and the efforts they were making, and that the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry were being followed, and all of those things. I would want to remind the Honourable Member Ramjitan that the UN Mission on the Descendants of Africans in 2017 condemned the Lusignan prison. Condemned the Lusignan prison. And from 2017 until 2020, there was more than ample time to take the appropriate measures to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the prisoners and the safety of the inmates. It's your mess that I'm cleaning up. You left it like that, sir. You are comfortable with it. Mr. Chairman, there was some suggestion from the Honorable Lady making the motion. The misplaced, misguided, confused motion that we were negotiating with the prisoners. There were no negotiations on the way. We were simply attempting to be clear about what their concerns were and to give responses. As the Honourable Member, Minister Frank Anthony explained, the chief problem was the lack of hearings. And as was said, the resort was undertaken through the Ministry of Legal Affairs with the judiciary and ourselves to put in the virtual courts, which are working and working well. Mr. Chairman, the Honorable Member Ramjatan left with me no visiting committee, no parole board, nothing which relate to the managing and oversight of the prisoners elsewhere. But here, and when we talk about sanctimonious gangsterism and those things, people get upset. But those things did not exist. Those things did not exist, and where there were a couple visiting committees, they were not visiting. Mr. Chairman, what he left, let me just say a few of the things that we're working at in respect of the prisons now. Now, I've advised the prisons for all the land that they have fallow there to plant 4,000 true trees because the prisoners do not get fruit. They don't know when last they had a banana. They don't know when last they had an egg. The land which should be farmed and to provide food for them at Lusiknan and at New Amsterdam has laid fallow for years. Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, in respect of the work being done to improve the facilities at the prison, I said before in this House, when we examined the budget, that we were building 2 new dormitories whose building construction are on the way, and that we are working towards establishing 5 new prisons at Lusiknan. And by the end of this year, we expect to have 3 of those new prison modules in place to house 600 people additionally. So, what we will do in 1 year, you were unable to do in 5 years. So, Mr. Chairman, I hear the mutterings about the Masruni prison, and I would relate it to the Camp Street situation, where enormous expenditure and early expenditure was done in buying prison cells and having them on the ground for near a year without any proper or any construction ongoing, which had to be restarted on our coming into government. So, Mr. Chairman, honorable members, this suggestion request somehow misguided because I don't support it, and I think Minister Frank eloquently expressed why we should not proceed with a commission of inquiry at this time, because we are already undertaking many of the measures which should have been done during the time of the sojourn of the Honorable Member Ramjatan. I know some details were provided by previously in respect of commissions of inquiry, done or inherited by the AP and UAFC in government. For me, the memorable one otherwise is the Rodney Commission of Inquiry, which was thrown out and ignored after many months of work. So, Mr. Chairman, while we continue to work at improving the conditions, the welfare, the housing of both the prisoners and the staff, I think it would be wrong for us to get bogged down in commissions of inquiry, in perhaps more reckless, irresponsible discussion about these matters. And given the fact that we do not have a properly constructed document in any way, in respect of the whereas clauses and the resolution, I am not in a position to support the undertaking of any commission of inquiry, absent as it is from the resolve clause. And I have to say again that we have made full disclosure with respect to this matter, and the police are examining certain other aspects in relation to the incident. So that is my position on it, and I thank you, sir, and honorable members for your attention.
Thank you, Honorable Minister of Home Affairs. Honorable Member, Ms. Gita Chandan Edmond.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Your Honor, may I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, as I rise to close the debate on this motion, I wish to state once more that this motion before us is an extraordinarily significant motion. For the members of the public, I will read a couple of the whereas clause for you to have an understanding and appreciation, and to appreciate the gravity of the matter and the need for the answers and justice. And I read, and whereas it has been widely reported and confirmed that several prisoners were shot by the members of the Guyana Prison Services in or near the Lusignan prison, resulting in injuries and deaths on the 19th of September 2020. Further, and whereas the lack of information surrounding the matters are of public concern, and whereas the Minister of Home Affairs has failed to provide answers on these matters of public importance, and the public remains without credible information after the 19th of September 2020 as to the circumstances which led to the unrest, injuries sustained, and the subsequent deaths of several prisoners. And whereas it is important in the public interest to know and understand the specific facts and circumstances that led to the shooting and the subsequent deaths of prisoners so as to prevent a reoccurrence. Your Honor, I wish to reiterate that this motion centers around our duty as members of the National Assembly to confront and to interrogate issues of national importance. We must therefore recognize that the sanctity of human life must be respected. Life cannot be restored if it has been lost. When we were bringing this motion, it was really to give the family members and by extension the people of this country the opportunity to hear what happened truthfully and to ensure that there is no reoccurrence. I am disappointed, and I really hope that the government would have understood that this was an opportunity to give them an opportunity to make certain things public, which they have not done so far. It is my view that the honorable members on that side of the House seems to think that they have to go through an unwarranted inconvenience to respond to the cries for justice or to a commission of inquiry. Your Honor, I would say that this is a very flawed view flawed view, and I'll ask them to look at the Constitution for guidance. The public wants to know, the family needs answers, and even if they don't like the questions we are asking, or the questions that the family are asking, or the public is asking, every government, worth their salt, should be able to present some reasonable answers as to what happened on that fateful day. And I said it with conviction that the family are out there and they need justice. They demand answers as to what exactly happened on that day. I seriously thought that the minister would have come today and tried to satisfy us and the public that you are in control. But I'm pleased that the Honorable Minister, recognizing the importance of the issue and the need to assuage the fear of the family and the public, to assure the public and the opposition that you are in control of public security. The government came into office with many promises that it had the solutions to crime and security and almost every other thing on this planet, that they could have fixed almost everything. We can see now that all their major campaign promises are nothing but fluff and bluff. Oh, we have heard all about the fables and the promises. Yet in the last couple of months, we have seen an upsurge of crime. Most glaring and in fact an indictment on this government has been the shocking disturbances in the prisons, police brutality, and I said in my opening speech, the list goes on. Prison can be an opportunity for prisoners to change and turn their lives around. There is an opportunity through education and welfare services, statutory or otherwise, to rehabilitate prisoners and provide them with the knowledge and skills to help them to lead successful and productive lives in their communities upon release. Through education courses, prisoners can be better equipped to find and sustain employment on release. becoming an asset to local communities and the wider economy. With crime on the rise, one may wonder, do prisoners deserve constitutional rights having committed crimes? The answer to this question is simple. When you are part of a free society, we cannot ignore the undeniable truth that when the rights of one group are weakened, all people's rights are weakened. So while we can debate whether prisoners deserve to have basic human rights, we have to keep in mind it is seen that oftentimes no measures are taken to rehabilitate lawmakers, and instead they are thrown away and effectively removed from society, take away their chances to reform and become a functioning member of society. So, Your Honor, while conversations around prison reforms and rights of prisoners will always be a controversial debate, as we have seen in the last 2 hours or so, we have to remember that prisoners are also human beings. And to answer the negative on their entitlement to human rights is to convict a nation without a trial. This motion, Your Honor, is about citizens of this country who have lost their loved ones and the need for a full investigation and a clear understanding of the events surrounding their deaths. The path of truth, Your Honor, resides in a commission of inquiry. So, Your Honor, this motion is about humanity. And I wish to reiterate that while in institutions of incarceration, persons are entitled to the protection of their human rights. They are entitled to the protections of the rule of law. They are entitled to justice. I wish to remind the government that the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights stated that the then government, the APNU-AFC government, must take action urgently to protect the prisoners' rights and address the overcrowding of the prisons. The coalition did all that they could have done. We have done our best, and we are proud of our records. You are now in the seat of power. Fix it. And when you ask what we did during our 5-year, I will say, actually we will say, we were busy cleaning up your mess, fixing up the broken systems that you have left. We were busy cleaning your 23 years of mess. You have the benefit of hindsight. You have the benefit of a COI report. Use it and use it wisely. Implement the recommendations that we didn't get to implement. And for those of you who want to paint a picture as if we did nothing, this is our record. The prison administration commenced the reconstruction of several prisons during our tenure. This was aimed to reduce the overcrowding of prison and to ensure that Guyana is in compliance with the human rights standard for the treatment of inmates. The coalition main achievements for 2015-2018 were, and all kudos go to Minister Ramjatan, the modernization and securing of prison estates infrastructure, the reconstruction of the Georgetown prison, the reconstruction of the New Amsterdam prison, reconstruction of the Mazaruni prison, construction of officers' living quarters, rehabilitation of officers in charge quarters, extension to prison headquarters, rehabilitation and expansion of the perimeter fences at Mataruni Prison and Tamari Prison, construction of exercise bay, Mataruni Prison, improved fleet of vehicles and vessels. This is aimed to improve the daily operations of the organization. Vehicles and vessels were also procured during this period. These include security trucks, minibuses, tractors and trailers, trucks, speedboat with shed, ATVs, 32-seater bus, communication equipment, firefighting capabilities, office accessories, securities, generators, industrial washers and dryers, industrial oven, industrial rice cookers, industrial gas ranges, water purification plant, bomb beds, arm and ammunition, riot gear, agricultural equipment were also procured. These purchases resulted in the improvement in the trade shop, where inmates were exposed to the training in various trades such as carpentry, masonry, auto mechanic, etc. Right, Mr. Ranjatan? In addition, the infirmaries have been upgraded. This has resulted in an improvement in health care for inmates. Mr. Ramjatan, you confirm that tools and equipment were also procured. Infirmary equipment, automobile tools, equipment, electrical tools, construction, plumbing, and masonry. Am I speaking the facts? In 2019, your achievements were infrastructure. The New Amsterdam prison was receiving a new state-of-the-art multi-complex trade shop due for the completion by 2021, which this government will benefit. And I'm sure they're going to claim that this was one of their projects. The APNU AFC government acquired this funding through IDB in 2019. This facility will be the first of its kind within the institution, given the fact that its capacity will be huge and it will be equipped with modernized tools. Your Honor, commissions of inquiry gather facts, report findings, and make recommendations in a structured and organized manner. It is unthinkable, therefore, to envision why any member in this honorable House would oppose this motion. We have a responsibility to the people of our beloved country to carefully address the issues of national concerns. Your Honor, we are talking about human beings who have been killed, and there have been no credible investigation launched. We must ensure that concerns surrounding these killings are fully interrogated so that clarity is established. And this, Your Honor, can only be emanated from a commission of inquiry. Your Honor, we on this side of the House, we stand up for the humanity of Guyanese citizens. We expect deliverance of justice to the families and answers to the nation. the identification of lapses and breaches for correction, the consideration of policy-making remedies, and above all, Your Honor, the critical need to identify culpability if the facts so determine. Your Honor, this motion seeks not to satisfy, like I've said earlier, any political pursuit or to quench any political thirst. It was stable, as I said earlier, with the best of intentions and the interest of making the operations of the prison, the well-being of the citizen, and the governance of the subject under examination, and by extension, respecting the sanctity of life, respecting human rights, and providing justice to the families who are in need of answers. So, Your Honor, it is against this backdrop that a commission of inquiry has become extremely important. For members of the public, the Commission of Inquiry Act, Section 2 states, the President may issue a commission appointing one or more commissioners and authorizing such commissioners to inquire into any matter in which an inquiry would be, in the opinion of the President, be for the public welfare. Your Honor, based on what we have heard on this motion thus far, and this is my opinion, there can be no honest debate over whether this issue is a matter of public welfare. The unexplained and the inconclusive death of any citizen constitutes an issue about public welfare. Against the backdrop demonstrated during the debate, the case has been strengthened, Your Honor. This motion has been vindicated based on the submissions received by the House. Your Honor, once again, negotiation in correctional institution is an academic field with specialized area. When the two honorable gentlemen directly inserted themselves in what was clearly a crisis negotiation, they placed the professional men and women, the prisoners, and the wider society at great risk. Anyone who stands up and justifies violence, and anyone who stands up and justifies killing in any form would be guilty of promoting a culture of nonviolence. The taking of human life has been strongly condemned worldwide and by philosophies, international human rights, in turn, sought to uphold this most sacrosanct right in a number of treaties. In some countries, there is a mandatory fatal accident inquiry for a person who dies in prison, especially in Scotland, where inquiries are done largely by independent persons. Your Honor, we have a responsibility to ensure that these deaths are inquired into. We must aim to provide mechanisms to prevent these types of deaths from reoccurring. There must be preventative measures put in place. What exactly are these mechanisms will be answered by a structured commission of inquiry that will determine why it happened, how it happened, the circumstances surrounding the death, reviews of the system, and make recommendations to ensure that the appropriate mechanisms are in place. So, Your Honor, it is incumbent upon all of us to ensure the safety of the vulnerable. I wish to reiterate once again that we on this side of the House, we don't need to wait on a COI to apply the doctrine of ministerial responsibility. The honorable member of the House who has direct ministerial responsibility for prisons has demonstrated over the last couple of months that he is on the mission to break the record for the worst ministerial outing in the records of Guyana's governance history. And as I've said earlier, it's just after 3 months of being installed he can produce this much catastrophe. One can only imagine or ask ourselves what will happen within a year. In the national interest, I'm proud. In the national interest, the honorable gentleman should throw in the towel. Do the honorable thing and resign before more harm is brought to the nation. Your disdain in your earliest speech for young MPs has not gone unnoticed. We, the new MPs, we stand here as new MPs to represent our representatives. Your disdain for the new MPs add to the list as to why you should exercise your moral conscience and resign. 2021 is not the era for broke up. This honorable House has a responsibility to ensure that issues which impact the citizens are dealt with in a structured manner so that the confidence of the people in justice can be restored. The issue, Your Honor, of public security and safety is not an opposition issue. It is a national issue. Therefore, it would be a shame that when the time comes to support this motion, the government will not object or vote against this motion. Your Honor, I must state that it is painful that this government has set a bad precedent if it does not support this motion. The members of the public will be asking, are you saying that it will be okay to breach the standard operating procedures? Are you saying that it will be okay to breach the rules and the laws? Serious crimes are being solved of recent on the basis of a confession with a lack of the evidence to corroborate. I've spent 10 years on the bench and I know too well how confession statements are obtained. If we do not deliver justice, are we saying to the nation that we are reverting to the era where we are solving cases by putting mentholated spirits on people's genitals? Once again, I urge all members with a conscience, to support this motion in its entirety. I thank you, your Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Members, before I put the question, I just want to say at this time who I recognize as logged on virtually. We have the Honorable Prime Minister, we have the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, we have the Honorable Member Mr. Darmlal, the Honorable Member Ms. Rodriguez, the Honorable Member Ms. Ferguson, the Honorable Member Ms. Hughes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 persons at this time. Honorable members, I will now put the motion. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The noes have it. The motion is defeated. Honorable members, we have on the order paper a motion by the Honorable Member Ms. Geeta Chandran Edmund, re the Henry Cousins and Harish Singh. Honorable members, this motion, since it was approved, has been overtaken by developments where there is now a matter in the court and other works by those involved are being conducted, other investigations I should add. To entertain this motion at this time would put the Assembly in contravention of its own standing orders. Further, entertaining this motion may ultimately jeopardize the ability of our justice system to conduct fair trials of persons before the court. We are aware that 3 persons have been charged in respect of the murder of these young men and have been placed on remand ahead of intended preliminary inquiry. The police have stated publicly that they're in search of additional suspects. I draw your attention to motions prohibited by standing orders. Standing Order 33.1 provides as follows. On a motion made and when necessary seconded, the Speaker shall propose the question to the Assembly, and after debate, if any, shall then put the question for decision of the Assembly. This standing order allows members of the National Assembly a right to move motions, but it is not absolute. In these circumstances, it is limited by Standing Order 26G, which is titled Admissibility of Motions, and provides as follows. In order that a motion be admissible, it shall satisfy the following conditions. Namely, G says, it shall not relate to any matter which is under adjudication by a court of law. Given that persons have been charged for these murders and are now before the court, this is a matter which is under adjudication of a court of law. The legal effect of this, therefore, is that the motion is not capable of being allowed at this time. This standing order gives effect to the sub judice principle, which stipulates that public statements must not be made regarding a pending case for fear of their impact on public opinion. On the principle of sub judice, the Court of Appeal of Barbados, in the Director of Public Prosecutions, reference number 2 of 2001-2002, 63, it's carried in the West Indies Law Review 1, had cause to say the following. Never again must it happen in this jurisdiction that while a matter is sub judice in a court of this country, or the proceedings directly and fundamental pertaining to that very matter, which is sub judice, are commenced elsewhere and publicized in such a manner as might prejudice the outcome of the proceeding. This principle of sub judice is well respected, sacrosanct, and entrenched in our standing orders, and I must add, also in our society. Criminal proceedings regarding persons accused of murder are therefore, and before the court, are therefore sub judice, and the motion in question would trigger proceedings which would be directly and fundamentally pertaining to those proceedings. This rule applies to this Assembly, and due to its status and nature of its work, the National Assembly is one of 3 co-equal branches of government I've mentioned before today, and is therefore one of the most powerful state entities. It is therefore unsurprising that the standing orders also limit other rights on the basis of the sub judice principle. Standing Order 17.1, for example, provides as follows. Questions may be put to a minister relating to the responsibility with which he or she has been assigned. Standing Order 21 IA, however, provides the following. The right to ask a question shall be subject to the general rules as to interpretation of which the speaker shall be the sole judge. A question, I says, a question shall not be asked, A, on matters which is sub judice. The effect of Standing Order 21 IA, therefore, is that no question, and I add no motion, may be asked in any matters which is under adjudication by a court of law. Further, Standing Order 41-2 prohibits members of Parliament from making reference to matters which are sub judice in speeches in the National Assembly. Standing Order 41-2 provides references shall not be made to any matter which is sub judice in a way as might, in the opinion of the chair, prejudice the interests of parties there. For over 2 decades, I had previously served as an MP, and I witnessed that this sub judice principle has been upheld by each and every speaker of the National Assembly. These standing orders, individually and collectively, indicate conclusively that the position of this National Assembly is that which are engaging the attention of the court, and specifically this motion, at this time, shall not be debatable. So that is my position with respect to the motion standing in the name of the Honorable Member, Ms. Vita Chandan Edmond, regarding the murder of the Henry Cousins and Harris Singh. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable Member, Ms. Minister Gil Teixeira,
Mr. Speaker,
Mr.
I didn't notice you look this way. Sorry about it.
Mr. Ramjitan.
I
Honorable
understand
Member.
your ruling, and I want to respect it. But in connection with the matters of such a ruling, I would have expected at least you be given the opportunity to Mr. Chandan and myself in relation to this subject. It has undergone a transformation, and we have a ruling here from a previous speaker in relation to the subjudice rule, where an action was brought in the High Court, and I think that is where, before the ruling would have been made, that at least you indicate, and so that we could have been in a position to help you. I think it's...
Honorable Member, Mr. Ramjitan, my position is at this time.
Yeah.
And I am prepared to listen to what you have to say, but I want to assure you
okay.
I will stand very firm with respect to matters before a court of law.
No, I could understand that.
Thank
And
you
we
very
all
much.
have to walk. But if I be allowed the opportunity to bring to your attention...
I wouldn't so do, sir.
You wouldn't also do?
No.
Okay,
Thank
okay. But, Your Honor, I want you to have a look at it.
The matter is still going to be on the order paper.
It
was
is
still
in relation
remain
to court matters.
Order paper. Right?
And it was the PPP that, at that point in 2013, it is the ruling of Mr. Raphael Trotman, Honorable Speaker, on the 7th of August.
I will take that. I will take that after, later, right?
Yeah, okay,
So,
well, fine.
good.
But I just want to indicate that there were some arguments I wanted to indicate, sir.
Yeah,
Because
but this is not a matter for us to argue here. It's in the sole discretion of the Speaker, as I mentioned, the standing order, and I have made a ruling. I am prepared to continue to be exposed to new rulings, conventions, and so forth as we move forward. Thank you.
Very well.
Thank you. This is a good time to move the adjournment of the Assembly. Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move the adjournment of the Assembly to 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 4th of February, 2021.
The Assembly stands adjourned to 10 a.m. on February 4th,